What is a missional community? This is a great question. It's an important question. A missional community is a group of people learning to follow Jesus in such a way that they see their own lives and the lives of those around them and even the lives of people in their neighborhood transformed. The idea of a missional community is that people are pursuing a learning about the way of Jesus, not just intellectually, not just for their own souls, but that gets lived out in the reorientation of their lives. Missional communities are not extravagant or complicated. They can actually be beautifully simple. Every missional community has three goals. Asking the question, how do we obey and follow Jesus together? The commands of Jesus are pretty fundamental and simple. And a missional community is asking, how can we live out and grow in our obedience to those commands as a group? In Mark chapter 12, we're confronted with this primary command that Jesus gives, and he's actually repeating a command of Moses. In chapter 12, verse 29, he's asked, what is the most important commandment? And Jesus answers, the most important one is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Jesus answers the question, what is the greatest commandment? What is the thing that I'm supposed to obey and grow up in? And he says it's loving God, loving your neighbor. And the life further on in his life, at the very end, when he's having this meal with his disciples, the Last Supper, if you will, Jesus says, I have a new commandment to give you. And he says that you would love one another. That you would love one another like a friend who lays down his life for the other. This is a beautiful third command. And so a missional community is trying to pursue growing in our love for God, growing in our love for neighbor, and growing in our love for one another. Growing in our love for God is something we call gospel formation or gospel enjoyment. That the fruit of a life united with God, a life saved, a life made alive through the gospel is one that gets to enjoy the presence of God. That we get to worship and confess, that we get to pursue, that we get to study, that we get to listen to his voice and all of these things. A community, a gospel-centered community, is one that pursues a love of God with our full selves, which looks like as a group learning to worship together, as a group learning to pray together, learning to grow in an ability to confess sins and confess truths about God. A group able to celebrate the riches of heaven that's been bestowed on us. A missional community is also a group of people that's pursuing a love for neighbor, or what we call mission. A missional community is set on growing in our ability to love our neighbors. To love our neighbors both in making disciples and proclaiming good news, but also loving our neighbors in a tangible display of the gospel, of grace, of service, of forgiveness, even a pursuit of justice. Every missional community has a mission that they're organizing themselves around. Because one of the things that we realize is that to live a life on mission together is actually pretty challenging if we're all going in different directions all the time. And so a group will have this mission, that a group of people that they've decided to love in word and deed in an ongoing basis. This common mission is simply a group of people that you're all rallying around. Not to the neglect of loving your family members, your neighbors, those that aren't included in that common mission. But it's actually that the common mission is sort of the laboratory that it even instructs and teaches us how to love others. Lastly, a missional community is to love one another, or what we call community. The one another's of scriptures make it quite clear that we're supposed to bear one another's burdens. We're supposed to encourage one another. We're supposed to rebuke one another. We're supposed to call people to a higher calling. We're supposed to engage with one another, carry burdens, suffer together. This is the life of community, one in which we're organizing ourselves to live out the commandments, the one another commandments that litter the entire New Testament. Now, attached with this video, I'm going to include some reading that you can engage more in each of those areas. And then when we meet in person, we'll talk more about the ways in which you can express that and lead a community in that. But what you would need to understand today is that those are the three pillars or principal priorities of a missional community. It's easy to get distracted by different things, but it simply is, how can you help this group of people grow in their love for God? How can you help this group of people grow in their love for neighbor, for this city? How can you help this community grow in their love for one another? One of the beautiful things about love that we see in the scriptures is that it's not just a feeling of like, yes, I have love for that neighbor. But what we see in Jesus is that God so loved the world that he sent his son to die. That God's love is not just a feeling that he has for us, but it's an action that's taken root in there is very purpose in this world, his very actions. And so for us, as we think about our communities, the question is, how can we get people to not just grow in their affections for God, but grow in their active love towards him, to grow in their active love towards each other as Christians, towards their neighbors. And this is the work of a missional community leader, creating an environment where that kind of growth can happen. We'll talk about leadership next.